peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers,
Yes.
do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Viewers, those listening to this tape or this video, I want to bring to your attention that the politics of proxy wars in Africa is becoming real, and it has become a reality. I want to bring to the attention of the African states that time and time again we have fallen victims of proxy wars. We fight wars that are not ours. We fall in conflicts that are not supposed to be, don't help Africa, and they don't help our countries at all. The proxy war that is in East and Central and the Horn of Africa has been ignited, supported, equipped by France. It has been very real that the French government, quietly through its company called Total Oil, has been searching for resources around the triangle of East and Central Africa and the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. The LAPSET was one of them, which could have been a landmark project for the people of France. They withdrew from it. The Tanga to Mwanza, they made it, they withdrew from it. The search for oil and resources through Total Oil has brought us the dangers of a proxy war in the region. It is therefore very prudent for people of the region to understand the dynamics that we are going through. For example, in Rwanda and the Burundi conflict, there is a proxy war. We are fighting a proxy country has brought us to a war between the two countries, between Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi. There is a proxy war in Congo who is sponsoring a resurgence of rebels that are fighting President Tshisekedi because he was not supported by countries that we know very well. This type of strategy has happened in North Africa, where Libya has been reduced to rubble, where each faction, even the government supported by United Nations, is being bombarded by a rebel called Khalifa Haftar, who is funded by countries that we know. The question of Somalia and the Kenyan maritime presents a challenge, a test case for Africa and East Africa to stand firm and denounce the actions of countries that bring proxy wars and proxy politics in our region. It is therefore my humble submission that for this conflict, for this to end, we must do enough publicity, advocacy around the area to tell and explain to the international community why this problem is going to create an imbalance in the peace in the region, and the regional peace will be affected. It is therefore my humble submission that as a Ugandan whose troops, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers of other many millions Ugandans who are in Somalia, condemn any action by the Somali government to try to resolve issues that should have been resolved amicably as Africans within the African confines. I submit therefore that some of us will go a mile further to do now, from now onwards, to expose, to show the challenges of these countries that make us fight a proxy war in Africa. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
You know, when one is asked to talk about leadership in Africa, one's mind wanders in many directions, because in the recent past, the continent of Africa has been the subject of scrutiny from many quarters. There are those who are Afro-pessimists and take the view that Africa will never realize our potential. There are those Afro-optimists who take the view that the jury is still out on the success or otherwise of the continent of Africa. I am an Afro-optimist. I take the view that this continent has had a glorious past, and that this continent has had her trials and tribulations, but her better days are in the future. There are those who, when talking about Africa, are in the habit of dealing with Africa as if it were one monolithic block. They do not recognize that the beauty of Africa is in her diversity. And indeed, when you care to undertake a geographical survey of Africa, you will be amazed at what the west of Africa offers, what the center of Africa offers, what the south of Africa offers, what the Horn of Africa offers, and what the north of Africa offers. That is the continent that we are talking about today. And we are talking about her because she continues in many ways to punch below her weight. And many are the commentators who take the view that the reason why she continues to punch below her weight is because the men and women who have had the privilege and honor to serve her in different political capacities or leadership capacities have not served her well. There may be merit in that assessment, but those who are quick to judge, those whose only claim to fame is that they are professional fault finders, must ask many questions before they judge and condemn Africa unfairly. This continent, and I remember, and if we are to judge this continent fairly, we must go back to the past and look to the past and ask about this continent. And there are many who have written about this continent. How many of you here will forget the great writings of Senegal's Anta Cheikh Diop, who has documented in many ways the glorious past of the continent of Africa, the great kingdoms in Africa. When Europe was still in the caves, Africans were building monuments. If they were not building them in the Ashanti Empire, they were building them in Monomotapa here in Zimbabwe. And there is a sense in which all those have been consigned to the Museum of History. And those who look at Africa see Africa as a scar on the conscience of humanity, not remembering that they were themselves co-authors of Africa's misfortunes. We are the only continent and the only people in the world who have been commodified. How many of you will remember that agrarian Europe had to commodify Africa in order to realize our level of development? At one time in those early days, we will remember, even as we talk about leadership, that half of the population of this continent was taken away. If they were not taken away from Ghana, which they then christened Gold Coast, they were taken away from Angola. If they were not taken away from Angola, they were taken away from Mozambique. If they were not taken from Mozambique, they were taken from Senegal. If the Arabs were not taking us, the Europeans were taking us. If the Europeans in their different tribes were not conquering us, they were stealing from us. Those are the realities that we don't talk about when we talk about this continent. And you know, if one cares to judge the African continent, one must be historically conscious. The oldest African country after we regained our independence from Greater Chief. And the question that we must ask ourselves, why is it that this continent finds ourselves in that space? If it is not Europe summoning us, it is the United States of America summoning us. Everybody is in the business of summoning us. One may ask, what has this to do with leadership? You know, I listened to the Chinese president speaking in eloquent Mandarin, saying how the relationship between Africa and China is a mutually beneficial relationship. He spoke about Africa as if it was one country. He did not remind himself, in my mind, that there are 55 countries in Africa, or 54 if you ask Morocco. And I listened to the Chinese president specifically mentioning the Gambia, and a few other, and Sao Tome and Principe, that they were welcomed back to the world because they had renounced their relationship with Taiwan, and they had now recognized the one China policy. Do I say this because there is anything wrong with China? No. I'm saying this because the Chinese are providing leadership for their people. They know exactly what they want for their people, and they are doing exactly what they want for their people for the benefit of their people. The question that I'm posing to us, do we know what we want for our people? Are we doing what we need for our people? And the answer is, I doubt. Why do I doubt? I doubt because at the end of the entire enterprise, the Chinese president said that he had given, or his government had given, 60 billion United States dollars to 54 African countries. Notionally, therefore, each country would be entitled to no more than 1.5 billion. Half of the presidents who are present in China, each one of them, half of them, can produce 1.5 billion. Sportsmen in Europe and America, including boxers, can earn $1 billion in a single bout. And we are here celebrating and singing the praises of China because they gave us 60 billion. Once again, it is a statement of their ability to recognize what leadership is all about. I'm submitting to us that when we interact with people like the Chinese, there is something to learn from them. We may condemn them at forums such as this, but there is wisdom in asking ourselves, how is it that this country, which about 30 years ago could not feed half our population, has in 30 years during our lifetime succeeded in pulling up nearly 800 million people out of poverty? How is it that every road that is now being built in Africa, whether the road is in Benin or in Nairobi, Kenya, or in Johannesburg, South Africa, or in Kigali, in Rwanda, or the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is a Chinese firm whose name I cannot pronounce as the contractor for that firm? How is it? How is it that China, which about 30 years ago did not produce a mobile phone, today out of every 10 mobile phones, we are using 6 which are from China? If it is not Techno, it is some other phone. If we are not inviting Jack Ma, we are inviting another Chinese, because we have seen that they have the ability to organize their affairs. Some of us, particularly those of us who are in the middle class, our pride is that our child is learning Mandarin as a second language, not isiZulu, Mandarin. I fear, Bishop, that in the next few years, when they bring their children for baptism, and you ask them, how do you name this child? They'll say, Deng Xiaoping Simfiwe. I'm still talking about leadership. We have seen what leadership can do. Leadership has catapulted China to another completely different orbit. We have seen that leadership has catapulted South Korea to a different orbit. We have seen that leadership has catapulted Vietnam, which was bombed to the ground in 1975. Vietnam now produces more coffee than all African countries combined. What have they done? The men and women who have been given the opportunity to serve those countries long recognize that leadership is about service. And I can't agree more with the Honorable Minister who spoke before me and the good Dr. Aaron who spoke before me, that the true essence of leadership is self-discovery and self-esteem. You know, where I come from in my tribe, and I know in many African communities, when you do something very well, they say, you have done it like a white man. When you arrive on time, they say, he has arrived like a white man. When you speak well, they say, you spoke like a white man. When you dress well, you dress like a white man. When you go to a beautiful place in Africa, you say, it does not look like Africa, as if Africans are incapable of doing the right things. And I'm telling us that until the day that we exercise the ghost of low self-esteem, Africa is going nowhere. I'm submitting to us that history has demonstrated times without number that personal conquest is the beginning of true leadership. If you don't conquer yourself, you are going nowhere. And I'm submitting to us that Africa must now recognize that whatever institutions you have, until and unless it is populated by men and women who have ideals, those institutions will collapse, never to be put together again. So going forward, ladies and gentlemen, I hold the view that a conference such as this, that brings together men and women who recognize that Africa should occupy her pride of place amongst the Committee of Nations, must be a conference at which we speak to each other honestly. I think we Africans have been too kind to each other for too long. The time has come that we must annoy each other. It is only when we have annoyed you sufficiently that we can canalize that anger, and that anger can then be used to move mountains. And my joy is that Africa is not sleeping. My joy is that Africans are now beginning to wake up to the reality that we have not only the intellectual wherewithal, but that we have the resources to make our countries grow and grow in the proper direction. You know, not so long ago, and not so long ago in this case means about 50 years ago, I read and listened to the leaders of the early days. If you listen to any one of those leaders, the clarity with which they were able to identify the problems of Africa and the clarity with which they were able to prescribe the medicine that could solve the problems of Africa was as titillating as it was as astounding. You know, I listen to the more casual works and I read the casual works of a young leader in the 1980s, such as Thomas Sankara. You know, Thomas Sankara is a young individual whose claim to formal education was not very much. He did not hold any PhD. He was an army officer. He overthrows the government of Upper Volta, and he goes into government and poses the question, why are we called Upper Volta? And he says the first thing that we must do is to change the name of this country so that it becomes Burkina Faso, the land of the upright man, and that the people of this country must be called the Bukinabe, the upright people. And he says we have been suffering with hunger and food shortages for too long. We have depended on France for too long. We can no longer be children and toddlers in our adulthood. We cannot be in economic and political diapers for too long. And he begins to release the country. And no sooner has he succeeded in doing this than the erstwhile colonial power says that this is a bad example. And they eliminate.
Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Punchline Africa TV, broadcasting all the way from Nairobi, the Republic of Kenya. Viewers, this morning we've delayed a bit by about 27 minutes, but you must have heard from PLO Lumumba who is telling us more things about Africa, what Africa can do, what can we do as Africans, what type of, changes do we need, what can we, survive on. We have a lot of resources. We have hunger killing people. There are people who have no food, yet we have everything that we want. What is going on in Africa? Thank you very much. With me this morning to look at Africa again. We have one specific topic, but later on Miriam will bring in African news that she has got for us. We have a very serious topic that must be tackled and be brought attention to all Africans and the world and the global institutions about the dangers of International Court of Justice, the dangers of this court taking a decision on anything to do with maritime situation in the Indian Ocean. What are the dangers? What can happen if this takes a side? Whichever way the case goes, it will create a very big impact in the region. That could change the dynamics of the region completely. Somalia fell into conflict in 1991, collapsed states, became a pariah state. Nobody wants to look at it. Armed men roamed the streets, the towns, the valleys, the mountains, the desert areas, the same desert areas, the nomadic life of the Somali. The Somalia that we had, the Somalia of Siad Barre fell to pieces. And once it fell to pieces, terrorists from all corners of the world maintained their presence in the capital, Mogadishu. One army swept the other out of the capital. The capital was like a plague field for the Americans. Americans came, they tried, they failed, they abandoned us as Africans to fight our war, to pacify this nation called Somalia. Today, the gallant sons of Africa from Djibouti, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Burundi have put their lives on to pacify Somalia. The African Union, we thank you very much for putting AMISOM to pacify this country, great one of Siad Barre. Wherever Siad Barre is, a Pan-African, a Siad Barre like a Mugabe, a Siad Barre like a Nkrumah, a Siad Barre like a Gabriel Nasser, Sekou Touré, Nyerere, Obote, Jomo Kenyatta, Haile Selassie. Siad Barre helped to liberate Africa in other places. He is happy because we have a presence of people trying to restore the best, one of the most organized cultures in Africa. The Somali culture is the most organized culture in Africa. But you find a contradiction. Being organized has not helped them. Being organized as a culture with one language, with one religion, they should have moved more and developed. But something, international agencies, as usual, dangerously came in, divided this country, it put it to pieces, left it for the slaughter of any Tom and Dick Harry who comes in to take each part of Somalia. Today, with me in the studio, before I go further, because I usually forget that I have a partner in all fields except the field that is beyond me, a partner that we share quite a lot in common when discussing issues that pertain Africa. A person coming up specializing in African issues. She is very good at that, and she is Miriam Ogutu. Welcome to the show.
Good morning there. For a moment I thought, who are you trying to introduce? Is that me?
Yes, it is you. I have very many ways of introducing you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
One thing we have in common, we love Africa and you only want the best for Africa.
And we do. Not only one thing,
yes.
Several things we have in common.
And we're here to make sure we advance our own narrative as Africans.
Exactly.
Yes,
we want our own narrative. We want a narrative that can be brought to the international community, that there is a danger of an international court of justice to try to put its nose into this affair. It is time this court left the African institutions that can actually be, negotiate, create dialogue, create harmony, such that we either share this proceeds we shared. This is shared by God. God put it there. There were no boundaries. The boundaries were created by Bismarck. In 1884, Africa was boundareless. That's why everybody roamed. Macapol, Vasco da Gama, all these guys, the Arabs, the Sultans, Said Mohammed, Said Sheikh Wood, all these guys roamed the Oman Empire. They came in the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire. They arrived in Africa. They found an Africa free. It had no boundaries. Africa was one. Africa was moving in one direction until 1884, that some people sat down and say, how do we distribute the wealth that this continent has? How do we get the maps? How do we divide them in order to get them working with us? This is how colonialism worked. The colonial legacy, the colonial hangover that we have today is brought us to where we are. And that we are now fighting and we are reinventing colonialism. Ourselves as Africans, we are bringing colonialism. We are saying, this is my border. This is where I belong. This is where I was born. This is, you go out of South Africa. You are from Nigeria. You are from Zambia. You go home. When I was growing up, I did not know that there was a place called Tanzania, until my father showed me a graduated tax ticket showing that we were paying dues to liberate Rhodesia, which is southern Rhodesia and northern Rhodesia. We played a role to liberate Salisbury from the hands of Ian Smith. We played a role to liberate Tanzania from the hands of apartheid regime. We played a role to liberate Mozambique. We paid taxes all the way, whether cotton tax, coffee tax, cocoa tax, and everything from West Africa in Ghana. Kwame Nkrumah put a tax on every export that was going out of Africa to liberate these countries. Today, we don't demand shares. We demand that we walk free. We demand that Africa remains borderless. Any African country, whether Somali, whether Kenyan, who tries to bring a border issue is somebody who has been misguided, an element who has been bought, an element who has been paid money, an element who is a mercenary into the complex of the African culture. We have this problem today. Who is the border? God is the only one who put the border, who said Indian Ocean and the mainland, hinterland, and the ocean. Nobody else had the right to do what people have done. But we are sticking on borders. We are talking of borders. We are fighting over borders. We are killing each other over borders. We are talking of territory. We are now acquiring new methods of neocolonial hangover exported, imported into Africa. Imported into Africa, that most of the Somalis who went to America mortgaged Somalia. They destroyed Somalia. They sold Somalia, including President Famijo. He sold Somalia. He mortgaged Somalia to the highest bidder in Texas. If the Somalis didn't know, I'm now telling it. I'm now saying it because I have evidence. I always don't say without evidence. I've now found out that part of our fight, why people want these territories, why people want this, is because there is a company, radical hardcore hardliners Republicans who bought Somalia.
So it's not even the Norwegian company.
Yes, it's not Norwegian. Norwegian company is just a by the way. It's working on the proxies of the bigger company. At the end of the day, if we die, we have to run to Texas to negotiate for whether we can leave or withdraw or stay or whatever it is. Look at that. Mr. Famijo is not telling the people of Somalia the truth. Can the ICJ solve the Kenya-Somalia maritime conflict? The answer is no.
And why will that be?
The answer is no. Because whichever way you touch, whichever way you touch, you will create another conflict. So it is better to sort it on table. It is better to sit down as Africans. You cannot have a ruling that will be favorable, that will not hurt Africans. And if Africans are listening to me, they better listen very carefully. We are all together, irrespective of religion, irrespective of color, irrespective of race. We remain an African continent. You can be near Red Sea, but you are not an Arab. Yes.
You brought that conversation, and I've seen some people having conversations about this, because remember earlier, maybe 2 months ago, the Arab Parliament told of Kenya and was telling Kenya to stay off Arab waters. Actually, it referred to the land that is now under dispute. The Arab Parliament called it the Arab waters, and
yes.
we're wondering, when did Somalis become Arab?
Look,
yes.
You can be near Red Sea.
Yes.
But there was a demarcation between Red Sea and Arabia, Saudi Arabia. You are not like a Yemen. You are not in Sana'a. You are in Mogadishu. Geographically, Mogadishu is not in Sana'a. It is it is in Africa. You can be near Mediterranean Sea, but you are not in Italy. You are in Tripoli or Tunis or Algiers or Cairo. You can be in the Atlantic Ocean, but you are not you are in Cape Verde. That's one of the most extreme country in the West, which goes towards the great movement of a triangle trade that we saw in Cape Verde. But you are not in America. Neither are you in Haiti. Neither are you in those countries of Jamaica, Bahamas, and the Caribbean states. You are still African. That's it. You can be near the apex between Gibraltar. You can see Gibraltar across, but you are not Portuguese or Spanish. You are still an African in Morocco. And this is something that we must tell the truth. You can be in Indian Ocean, but you are not Indian. You are African. And therefore, we must think like Africans. We should not think like an Indian Ocean, that therefore let's go and attach ourselves to India or to the Gulf states of Oman or Gulf states of UAE, Qatar. You can't be Qatar. You can only be Qatar by religion. Maybe because they spread religion. The Ottoman Empire and the Arab Oman, they brought that religion in that area. While the missionaries also spread through Tanzania and Malawi and Lake Malawi and Livingstone and Kraft and Stanley and all these guys, Lugard, Captain Lugard, look at them. They all walked all the way and brought religion in the interior. But still, you remain an African. You never change. The continent was separated by God from the rest of the world by Red Sea in the east, northeast, eastern part by Indian Ocean, northern part by Mediterranean Sea, western part by the Atlantic, and that is all. If someone has another Africa, you can show me one. But you cannot solve any of this crisis. If you touch the crisis of Kenya and Somalia, you will have brought a chaos in the Indian Ocean. Just as I warned the people about Libya, that if you kill Muammar Gaddafi, I told the people, I wrote a letter, I gave a letter to Museveni. The first letter that Museveni was able to print. I said, if you touch Gaddafi, we are dead. The Mediterranean Sea will not be the same. Today it is killing more Africans than the waves themselves. There are more Africans dying on a daily basis in the Mediterranean Sea as a result of dismembering Libya. If France had listened to us, it would have not dismembered Libya. Libya today suffers from the wounds of stupidity of the French foreign policy. It's the same policy that they are pumping to go and pay for Somalia the ICJ fees that stay in that court. We want to catch Kenya because Kenya refused to give us. Kenya refused to give us the oil we wanted. Kenya refused to give us Ngamia 1, Ngamia 2, Ngamia 3. Therefore, we have a problem here. Today, we must address it. That's the ICJ, Miriam. Therefore, I hand it over to you. You ask the questions that you want, I will explain. Does the ICJ solve the crisis between Kenya and Somalia? I have a group called the Deterrent Group. I want to thank my colleagues, Professor Anangwe, Amkoa Onangwe. I want to thank Dr. Jesse Mashati. I want to thank Dr. Henry Gombia. I want to thank Dr. P. Clark, Paulo Clark, the former Minister of Transport and Maritime, my great friend in Britain. Our group does not exist to benefit from the oil proceeds. We exist to discuss, to find, to deter any source of discord that is going to come from this type of obnoxious, undemarcated boundaries of the ICJ. You remember ICJ, like ICC, has got extra powers that are stupid, which Mugabe could call very stupid. And because of that, I would like to play the tape of Mr. Mugabe before you come in. When Mugabe stood up and said, keep your Britain, I keep my Zimbabwe. Let's not be used as puppets to solve these people's problem by calling us Millennium Development. To develop what? We should be the ones to be given our own money, not to be supervised, because this money was stolen. It was taken from us and then delivered to them. We want to know as to why. We should be the ones to be the guinea pigs, the ones to be sampled on. Today, Somalia, when Somalia was crying for help, America folded its hands. Today, Mr. Famijo is the best guest to the High House in America because he mortgaged it a long time ago. The problem of this conflict is not even in Mogadishu. The problem is in the diaspora. In international waters, Somalia needs to be tackled in the international community. People have mortgaged it. They have gone to get white people and they said, I have a building, I have a hill, and under the hill there is something which can make telephones. And they have sold the Somalia. Honestly, the leaders of Somalia currently have sold it. They don't have Somalia at heart. There are agencies somewhere in Turkey, in Oman, in Qatar, in IAA, in Saudi Arabia. They have houses there more than they have good houses in Somalia. It is us, the Ugandans, suffering, battling terrorists who are coming, regrouping from Yemen, Afghanistan, and other sources where they are being sent away. We have a problem here. And that is the problem that we have.
And that is the
thank you very much. Over to you, Miriam.
Before, I think you mentioned a clip that you wanted played of former President
Yes.
of Zimbabwe. I don't know if it's ready, production. Maybe you can tell us if the clip is ready. If not, then we can move on with our conversation.
The clip from...
We don't mind having and bearing sanctions banning us from Europe. We are not Europeans. We have not asked for any inch of Europe, or any square inch of that territory. So, Blair, keep your England and let me keep my Zimbabwe. Mr. Chairman, having said that, may I say, people must always come first in any process of sustainable development. And let our Africans come first in the development of Africa, not as puppets, not as beggars, but as a sovereign people. I thank you.
From that clip, you can see for yourselves. This man is gone. When will Africa have another person of this nature? When will Africa speak with one voice? If today, in the 21st century, in 2019, we are looking for boundaries, we are talking of us, we Somalis, we Ugandans, we Kenyans, we South Africans, we Sudanese. Today, we were put together without notes from anybody. But God put us on a continent, separated us with water. And that water had a meaning. Why did Moses leave Egypt to leave Africa alone? Has somebody asked 4,000 years ago? Moses left Egypt, crossed over to Sinai to avoid Africa. That's the problem we have. Why do we want to sort it out? Why do we call Norway to sort us out? To sort what? What does Norway know when Moses left 4,000 years ago? Why wasn't there land for Moses to cross over? Indeed, there was land. And that land in 1969 became Suez Canal. The biggest man-made canal in the world. We separated ourselves from those people. We separated, we cut ourselves back and came back to our continent. It is our continent. Therefore, nobody can solve any of these issues except they will make us fight so that they can go and take the resources that we have.
that we have, and before you are watching that clip from former President Robert Mugabe, who, by the way, right now is on his way. The body is being flown from Singapore and is on its way to Harare for the final rites of his burial. But we'll talk about that in the next hour of the show. But let's just stick to the subject right now. So I was asking earlier, the relationship between Kenya and Somalia. You know, when somebody takes you to the court already, that means that the lines have been drawn. Regardless of what the court findings will be, how will Kenya and Somalia look at each other, and why is it important that Kenya and Somalia should maintain a cordial relationship, especially if we were to really get rid of this Al-Shabaab menace that has been plaguing this region?
Yeah, look, someone has put a knife between Kenya and Somalia. And the country that has put a knife between Kenya and Somalia is Norway, France, Britain to some extent, and oil companies. We need to tackle the oil companies. We need to expose them. We should, and then we need now to tackle and target, also tell countries like Qatar that want our oil, our gas. Kenya is rushing into signing agreements for the Qatar empire. But yet Qatar is the one funding actions behind us. We must put them on table and say, you have to put pressure. The ICJ route is already flawed. I don't want to discuss that gentleman, because we have a case with him in court. Let the court decide. Let the court see if the complaints that I've raised, I know you are coming to write that. The complaints that I've raised, I did not file a case. I'm not a party, a state to file a case. I've filed the complaint. If UN soldiers come to rape people in Congo, do you sit and watch and say UN will solve it? You will say that Congo will solve it or Uganda will solve it. You who is affected, you go to court, you go to UN, send this document to the court. Let the internal mechanism themselves tell us what they want to do.
So, of course, on September 9th to 13th, there was supposed to be the start of the hearing of the Kenya-Somali maritime row at the International Court of Justice. But it was postponed and because Kenya's government sought time to recruit its defense team. But also you, Dr. Matanga, you went there as the chairperson of Pan-African Forum and filed a petition in the court seeking orders to have the presiding judge in the case, Abdullahi Ahmed Yusuf, to recuse himself of an alleged conflict of interest.
Yes. The reasons were very clear. I wouldn't discuss them here now, but I will tell you I'm in touch with the court. I know the procedure. They wanted to be served quietly, and I have left it quietly. I've notified the state parties concerned. I've sent a copy to the president of Somalia. I've not hidden myself. I've told the president of Somalia. I've sent a copy to the government of Kenya. I've not hidden myself. I've said these are the reasons why I want this and that. And above all, I'm pushing for a total avoidance of this court. This court cannot solve this crisis. This crisis can only be solved by Somalis and the Kenyans themselves.
Is that what Kenya was pushing for? Because Kenya have been very vocal. In fact, it wanted, first of all, to just have a diplomatic talk outside of court with Somalia. Somalia refused. But also Somalia seems to not be very keen in having AU resolve this matter, because AU also wanted to resolve this matter. Why is it you feel as though Somalia is distrusting AU? And if they are distrusting AU to that level, why are they in the African Union in the first place?
It is not a distrust. It is who pays you. Somalia is being paid by countries that have already divided Libya. They have taken Libya, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. They don't like anything to do with anybody So they have given him General Khalifa Haftar to kill Libyans. So this same group that runs to Arab League and say, we shall recognize, we shall defend Somalia. They want to divide us. There is no difference between the British colonial master or the French colonial master with the Arab colonial master. Because they also have colonial traits of slave trade. You remember they used to carry us.
Yes, the ones
we have not asked
Africa.
for reparations.
Yes.
We have not asked for reparations from Oman, from Qatar, from UAE. It's our money, it's our labor.
And in fact,
yes, the labor that went out of Africa through Bagamoyo, Ujiji, Morogoro, Dar es Salaam, all the way from the Matanga place up in the mountains of Congo carrying tusks. I was born when the Arabs were trading in tusks. That's why my name is Masanga. Masanga in Uganda means tusks of elephants. They were being carried from Garamba Park. These elephants have been killed all along. My village is on the route of the great northern slave trade that passed through my Mount Elgon, through all the way towards West Nile, Karamoja, into Congo forest. Timber, tusks, skins, hides and skins, rolled out through up to Mombasa, up to Dar es Salaam, through Lake Chigoma, Ujiji, Morogoro, Tabora, until they arrived. We still have a problem with these guys.
We still have and in fact, the slaves that they sold to the Europeans and American, those sides of the world, you can actually trace their lineage. But those who were sold to the Arabs, or those who Arabs took to become the donkeys of the beast of work there, they are actually maimed or killed because Arabs, that's how they look at us Africans. And I'm just wondering, as the rest of the world, Somali is in the Arab Parliament or the Arab League. Somalis are not Arabs. Maybe that is a conversation for another day, but they're not.
No, they are Africans. This is the problem of...
In fact, they trace from all the way from North
the problem
Nigeria,
of identity.
the Fulani.
The problem of identity
crisis
has
here.
a crisis. They have come with the father. The father of this identity crisis, Famijo. The president of Somalia himself got this presidency when he had an American passport. He did not first seek to get an American passport, a Somali passport. He got an American passport. He got the presidency. He ate it, and here we are.
They're more Fulanis than they are Arabs. In case they don't know, because they trace themselves all the way back from the northern part of Nigeria. But that is a conversation for another day. But here we are today, and of course the application you made is still in court, so we will not get too much into it. But I know one of the key issues you had in that you're saying there's a risk of an unbalanced and biased outcome.
A very big one. You see, imperialism. To some younger men there who are writing because they have seen a computer today, I use the typewriter to answer my exams. And I just want to tell you, I don't use this equipment. Somalia has been the beacon of Pan-Africanism. That's why you see President Museveni carried all his 10 to 11, 12,000 troops, Ugandan bodies. All of us carried their sons, brothers. I have several brothers today as I speak, serving in Somalia, in the UPDF. We have equally several Somalis in Kampala doing very well. Very well. The richest people in Kampala are Somalis. Nobody tells them to leave or they should not talk. They are allowed to talk about Uganda politics. They participate. Look at that. Let's go to the Cameroon and the Nigeria Peninsula. Why are we not solving this problem that way? Why are we not solving that problem that way? It was going to bring a very big war. Do you hear of the war? No, it was solved. All parties should withdraw. That's all what I'm saying. Withdraw. Because there is no balance here. You want to balance it when Norway is chasing for oil. When Norway is chasing for oil on behalf of Chevron in Texas, in the biggest security network on planet Earth is found in Texas. You can't do anything without Texas. You know that? You can't win an election in America without Texas. Without having Texas, without going through that institution. It is that institution that is making us fight.
So could dialogue perhaps be the solution for this? And now we know the court is there, so it's inevitable it will continue, and it has been scheduled for November. But can...
Well, how do you go to November? You go to November to do what? Why should Kenya go to November to do what?
So what would you advise the government of Kenya to
do?
You
don't go.
And then what will happen?
Let them make a ruling, which will not be binding.
So if you don't appear, the ruling will not be binding?
They can make a one-sided ruling when you have not heard us. We have sacrificed enough for Somalia, boss. We have. And we should not play these stupid games or being called in international stupid agencies where judges are selected because some of them have relationship with men and men to men or women to women. We can't go that side. The selection of judges to that tribunal is awful. It's very bad. You can't even talk about it. I don't want to tell you here because you will close your eyes. It's not merit. It is better to go to a court in Mogadishu than going to ICJ. Because it has no mechanisms of where you can revert for appeal. At least ICC, there is an appeal chamber. This one has no appeal chamber at all. There is nowhere where you can appeal once the ICJ has said so. So what is it that is going to cause a problem? That is not a court. That is a stupid institution created by 5 members of the Permanent Security Council. That must be disbanded. That's it. This time is head on with UN. Mugabe is gone, but Mugabe has left disciples who will fight for Africa to be equal. Africa needs a share in the UN. Who selected these 5 permanent members? The supremacy. Where did the supremacy come from? From cheating our diamonds, our gold, our oil, our timber, our skins, our hides, our cows, and our people. You have forgotten our people who were exported through Bagamoyo, who were exported through Cape Verde, Haiti, left there to die. Millions who died. It's an African resource. It's a resource for Africa, human resource. We lost human resource. ICJ is not a court for Kenya to be part of it. Because there is no appeal mechanism. And we have to fight to change some institutions. If institution was created in 1945, I was not born. Why should I abide by the rules of 1945, of which Hitler had killed people? Then you stopped everybody to be killed further or to be harassed. Then you put rules that kill me. Time has come for Africans to review whether this institution is worth it or not. It is not worth it going there. And I don't think Kenya will get, because there is no appeal mechanism.
But also Kenya has come out very strongly through its Ministry of Foreign Affairs and had said Kenya's position over this matter is inevitable and we shall not cede even an inch of our territory to anybody. So that is what the position of the Kenya's government. But also I think there's in the whole of this matter, there's the heart of it, because Somalia had written to Kenya, to its Foreign Affairs Ministry, and said it is not offering, nor does it have any plans to offer any blocks in the disputed maritime area until the parties' maritime boundary is decided by the ICJ. Somalia's government wrote to Kenyan government to assure Kenya, don't worry, let's wait for the case to end. And then before Kenya knew it, they were being auctioned somewhere in London.
They have. Up to today, it is not even in London. The auction is in Texas. I got all the documentation I want now. And I can prove to this court that there is someone in Texas whom Famijo has sold these blocks. Why is the issue coming today because of Famijo? Why? Why?
In all these years.
Yes.
Why?
Why?
Is it that in 2004
Why?
is where it started? Yeah.
Yeah. Why? Somalis who are yapping on this platform, tell me,
Sorry,
why didn't the issue come when Sharif Ahmed Sharif was the president? Another Abdallah something chick was the president. Why has it come? Because Famijo is the president. Because it's part of the syndicate, the cartel that sold these oil platforms to the Texas. It's part of it.
So the timing is very curious.
Yes. Not even the timing. He wants, his term could end. He could have not solved the problem. He could be taken out of power by his parliament. And it is better for the parliament to start knowing right now that all this oil you are talking about, you want to fight with Kenya, is already sold by Famijo and the clan and the leadership. They have sold it. Famijo is a member of the Republican, the hardcore Republicans. If you look at how he ended up to get an American passport. And that's the message I want the world to know. And I'm taking it all over. I have no regrets for that. And I'm going to make sure if Kenyans have, I'm not being told by Kenya government to do it. I'm doing it on my own as a Pan-African. And I'm following these cases one by one. I want to find out why the other presidents did not raise this issue. And why Mr. Famijo has raised this issue. Whose interest is Mr. Famijo, the current president of Somalia? Is he playing whose interest? Whose tune? Whose music? Which roulette? Whatever you call it.
Because the tussle began in August 2014 when Somalia sued Kenya, the International Court of Justice at The Hague, Netherlands, for unlawful operations in her maritime territory, measuring 100,000 kilometers, square kilometers. And so Kenya has had this part since God knows when. So it's only in 2014 that through the then now president of Somalia thought, you know what, we need to get this back. So as you mentioned there, the timing is really, it's very suspect, especially when you see the interest and the people who are actually having interest in the waters of Somali, especially Kismayo port there. And these 15 blocks that is under dispute is in Jubaland, so that is also something interesting to note there. So finally, how will this, I don't know, because I still believe that it is important for Kenya and Somalia to be in good terms for the sake of this region.
No problem.
We cannot afford that. Why is Somalia not really looking at it, coming in a way of a diplomatic way and try to, a brotherly way, as Kenya has been towards Somalia, because we have been very accommodative, we have been very supportive of Somalia. So why can't they have that gesture, and by them going against the world, the gentleman agreement that they had with Kenya, going against their own word, what does that say about Somalia and its leadership?
It is a friendly leadership. You tell me if Famijo loses prime minister or president, he will stay in Mogadishu?
They don't even stay in Mogadishu.
That is the Somalis answer for me, this question. If President Famijo loses the presidency in Somalia, where will he go? He's not going to go to Mogadishu and sit like others have sat who are real patriotics. He's going to fly back to America, Minnesota, and maybe join one of those book printing presses to print books.
All right. Our viewers there, and Khalif Madar, I think you're saying part of your comments there, you're saying that Somalia, but give to Kenya as a brother of Africa. Let us destroy boundaries of colony. So we're still using the boundaries of the colonial, our colonial masters to, separate us as Africans. That I think what is alluding there this afternoon. One of our viewers there, Khalif Madar. Thank you so much for writing to us. So of course the case that was supposed to be taking place at the International Court of Justice that was meant to start on the 9th. Somalia was supposed to present its case and Kenya was supposed to respond on the 13th, but it was postponed to November, I think 5th, right?
Yes.
November 5th.
Yeah, for what? They can have their dates.
So you still don't feel it's important?
To go there and do what? What Kenya wants to go there and do what? So, and the Somalia wants to do what? There's no appeal there. If the court turns around and said this boundary belongs to international waters, where will Somalia appeal to?
All right, and all right, there it is now, and I see Somalis there. They're actually trying to express their opinion about this matter, which we respect. Thank you so much. I wish you would write in the language you would understand, that maybe would have a conversation that both of us would understand. But we're trying really to understand from what we can gather there, yes, so that we can have a productive conversation today. So also, of course, in June this year, Kenya was set to file a complaint with the Norwegian and British governments, whom it accuses of fueling the Kenya-Somali conflict. So it has been apparent that the Kenya-Somali conflict is not just about these two countries. There are other powers behind this conflict and that stand to benefit. And it appears as though there are people who are caught in this that don't understand the matrix that is being played and the proxy wars that is being played by other countries outside of Somalia, especially, and that stand to benefit from this, of course, these lands. And countries like the UAE, they're very keen on having a port there, and some other countries that are, keen on getting a hand on the oil, blocks there and the disputed blocks there in Somalia. And so we don't seem to understand really what this impact might have, in this region. So, of course, Somalia has been pushing for the KDF to leave, especially the part of Jubaland that KDF is occupying there. And Somalia's government has been very uncomfortable with Uganda and Burundi armies through AMISOM. And in fact, he wanted that Ethiopia and Eritrea should work outside of the AMISOM agreement and just be there. They have just a bilateral agreement between these two countries for them to bring their armies there, but not to work under AMISOM. What could be the advice? What could be the idea behind this, Mr. Famijo pushing for him to have just a bilateral agreement between?
He wants to divide. It is the same countries that have come inside to divide the question of Somalia. They want to divide Somalia to cause a conflict, an internal conflict, to save Al-Shabaab. Because once you have an internal conflict between Jubaland and the central government, and you bring in Ethiopian troops, you weaken the resolve of international community helping AMISOM. Therefore, AMISOM becomes weak and kills people, and the people will start fighting.
Michael Njuguna, there you're saying Kenya will never surrender its territory to anyone, whether superpowers or whoever may be. If our forefathers managed to defend it the way it is, then we will not give it out. It's our birthright. And for our Somali watchers, you're watching us this afternoon, the reason why we're not able to read a lot of your comments, one of them is they're a bit insultive. So they're
insultive. They have never learned the manners.
I wish we're just having an objective conversation.
We wanted to know whether ICJ,
and we appreciate your opinion.
Yes, whether ICJ can solve this problem. In case tomorrow ICJ comes up and says, Somalia, this territory is not yours, what will Somalia say?
They're saying,
ask these men who are insulting us today.
I've been seeing a lot of them saying, Somalia, they can fight. So
fight what? Because that's exactly where they want to end.
That is the mentality.
They want to end fighting. But this court, I am telling the international community that this court has no appeal chamber. This court has no amicus curiae. This court, you cannot give them an idea. This is a very bad court to solve our problem as Africans. That's all I'm saying. And there's nothing that will stop me. Maybe death can stop me, but it will not stop me to say the truth that the United Nations Security Council performed this court, arranged this court, destroyed this court, this nation for the purpose of keeping Africans tied to them, because they knew there are only many African countries coming here. The cases that have been there, very few from other Latin American countries, third world countries. Show me where America has accused Canada of Alisaka. Is it Alisaka? What is the northeastern? Alaska, sorry. Alaska, they quarrel, but they have never taken each other to this court. Did you know that?
And they can't.
Yes. So why are we Africans being held in this court? I am doing this for both Kenya and Somalia. I'm not saying there is no need of Kenya and Somalia going to this court.
Or fighting for that matter.
Or fighting there, because they will get nothing there. This court is going to bring more problems for us, the entire region of East Africa and the Horn of Africa, because it has no appeal chamber. It has no appeal. The judge who is there is final. Once they say, give it, take the car and go.
That's it.
Even when it is unfair, you take it. So why should Kenya go to such a court? Why should Somalia go to such a court? Why should Somalia waste money that would have built a dispensary in Mogadishu to go and pay for a case which might not end today? It is because the president is using it for eating. For eating money, for buying more houses in Turkey, in Accra, in United Arab Emirates, in Saudi Arabia. They are buying houses for themselves, while the ordinary Somalis are suffering. That's all.
All right, and of course, Somalia rejected the Commission of the African Union invitation to a briefing on the maritime row with Kenya. So if, I think I've asked this before, if they're so uncomfortable and have no faith in the African
Union. I'm talking about the president,
yes,
because the president is the main man who has pursued this thing to the international waters. The previous governments wanted this thing to be resolved here.
Amicably.
That's why I'm talking about your president. 2, I know him. So what do you want to know? I know him more than you do.
Okay, or is it said that Ibrahim is very low?
The topic is the president of Somalia should not go to ICJ. ICJ has no chamber for appeal. A court in Mogadishu has an appeal court. If the lower court can defeat you, you go to the appeal. That's it.
So it might not work even in favor of any of these countries.
It can't. That is my fight internationally.
But Somalia has confidence in
Yet,
the court.
my fight internationally is that I don't want any of these countries to appear in an amorphous, obnoxious, stupid Second World War court.
Kuri Angelo here, one of our viewers, is saying, what could be the solution to the Kenya-Somali maritime then? Are you suggesting the two countries sitting down and solve their dispute? What is the role of the African Union?
Exactly.
Somalia refused.
Somalia has refused.
Yes.
And that's why I'm hitting Famijo. I have no regrets. What will Famijo do? He has an American passport. What will he do? He ran to America when Somalia is in trouble. Yes. And if Somalis don't talk about him, I talk about him. He's my African leader. I must talk about him. Who is he? He's an American puppet who has sold Somalia to Texas oil companies. Yes, we are going to go head on. Head on. And next week, let's meet in London head on. We are not going to keep quiet.
There's going to be a meeting in London.
Yes, we are not going to keep quiet. We must, about everything. Why is the court not having, you tell me why the court has no appeal chamber? Why?
But also a good question there. African Union, that is why it was created, to make sure that it was able to solve the problems of this continent.
At least in African Union, if you are defeated, you can take the dispute to African Court of Justice.
But Somalia was not even open for that.
It doesn't. This president here is busy dividing us. Is busy dividing Ethiopia against Kenya, Kenya about this and that. That is all he's doing. Going to Eritrea, divide us. That is what he's doing. This is an American puppet. And Somalis must know about that.
So who stands to benefit from this chaos?
Famijo. Because his house in the US is guaranteed. We have facts, boss. And that's what we are going to do. I want to leave the rest of it for you to have African news.
And also, yes.
And enjoy the rest of the show. Unless you have any more questions.
No, just Qatar plans to build a new seaport at Somalia's Hobyo, a potential strategic investment in the area of East Africa, fiercely contested by other Gulf rivals. So there are other people who are really contesting. So they want this case to be over quickly. They can come in and start doing whatever they want.
I would like to, maybe that is...
And Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, which are locked in a protracted dispute with the fellow Gulf Arab Qatar, have been competing along the Doha's ally Turkey for a foothold in the Horn of Africa. So all these countries, actually, they are fighting to have a piece of Somalia. Somalis, come on, please, you guys. So this is not just about Kenya and Somalia. Otherwise, it would have been amicably resolved between Kenya and Somalia a long time ago.
As we are on air, the British court, the Old Berry, the House of Lords, has said Boris Johnson.
Boris is in trouble.
Yes.
What is happening?
You saw that?
Yeah.
Very good things coming from Britain.
What is happening?
British ministers have reversed Theresa May's student visa rules. International students will now be allowed to stay in the UK for 2 years after graduation to find a job under new proposals announced by the Home Office. Thank you very much. You see, my talk, my noise pays. You see that? Mm-hmm. That's now very good. My noise pays. Anybody who talks about me, God strikes him. Yes. Yes. You see, I disagreed with the Home Office over this rule. That someone has got the technicality here. Why can't he stay and practice it, then go and give Africa more technology when he knows what he's doing? What is the use of going to study in the United Kingdom? Then as soon as you finish the last semester, you are on with your suitcase. Back to here.
Faxan Akyar, thank you for watching and for writing to
Yes.
us. And you're saying that
Fine, thanks.
President Farmajo has already withdrew his American nationality. All right. I'd like to know what Doctor will say about that. But thank you so much. Keep writing to us. And Ibrahim, you're saying Farmajo is our president. We, ACC, whatever decision he talks, we I don't know. Please write a language I can understand, please. And so someone is saying that actually Farmajo already withdrew his American nationality. One of our viewers there. But anyway,
you don't tell me this nonsense. This nonsense, Mr. Faxan Akahai. He got the presidency on an American ticket. Why didn't you question him? It means it was rigged. He should have declared and allowed real Africans, Americans, who have Somali passports. Somalia has come back. You can print the passport. There are Somali passports being issued. So if he goes on, we shall dent his credibility. Kabisa. We are going to dent his credibility everywhere in the world. And you haven't seen me yet.
Do we take a break?
No, there is no break. There is some good breaking news here.
All right, go ahead.
Boris Johnson's suspension of parliament ruled unlawful by the High Court. Hallelujah.
He's having more trouble than...
So we go back. You see, in Britain, you can't withdraw Britain from the rest of the world when you are telling the world to integrate. Then how will Britain come here to tell us in Africa to integrate? He withdrew because he wanted the time to run fast. Then he comes and said, Brussels has closed my door.
But he's been saying that he does not care. He can, Britain can actually leave the EU without even a deal.
Where shall we get the medicine?
I don't think he
It is like a Somalia telling us that the Kenya can leave quickly when they can't even handle a toilet of a one toilet. Tell you the truth.
In Mogadishu.
You can't even, they are being bombed every day and then they say, some troops leave.
We still need each other, people.
We need each other.
Yes, we do. We need each other. And we cannot downplay the role of other African countries have played, especially in Somalia. So we are happy that some sense of normality is returning, but it's not fully there. And we will be happy one day if Somalia is able to really take care of its own businesses. We are tired of our people dying in Somalia. And these are the things, we have been paying by our own blood, our malls being bombed every other day. And, it was quite unsafe here in Kenya until, of course, the government took control. But still, we will be happy when Somalia actually is able to enjoy the peace and able to just run the country normally. That will be our joy as Kenyans.
Yeah, I think we have a very interesting conversation. Catherine Mwangi says, yes, he should have declared that he was an American. So he disadvantaged Sharif Ahmed, Sharif, the others who were in the race. So this is the topic that we have. Can ICJ solve the problem of Somalia and Kenya? The answer is no. That's my summary.
All right.
And we continue with it tomorrow on the Punch. I think it is very interesting. It will be higher than the Mugabe and the South Africa.
We'll talk about it tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
In the evening.
So,
but also, yes, I know you want to leave.
Yes.
But before you leave, Paul Biya gave an address yesterday.
Paul Biya
from Cameroon, yes,
is a very strange man. The gods first bring you down. The African small gods first make you mad, then destroy you. Paul Biya, we initiated a process. We have been supporting the process of negotiation and dialogue. But you can't dialogue when you have imprisoned the people. You can't dialogue, you have given people life sentence. I thought Paul Biya was going to announce the release of the people who should negotiate. That is another terrible African who banks his money in Paris, who gets his suits from Paris, but drinks African water.
Maybe he imports the water as well.
Maybe he imports the water, you don't know.
Mineral water.
If the wife of Paul Biya has got something that, a wig that costs $1 million,
The lovely hair.
luxury. When people in Cameroon are in the forests, they don't eat food. It's a very sad story for Africa. But anyhow, I just want to take 5 minutes. It is 12:31.
12:31, yes.
I want to take 5 minutes or 6 minutes and I do a small clip, which I will leave on this question. Viewers and the international audience listening to this audio or video tape, the International Court of Justice is a court that was created to solve problems of disputes of any nature. But this court was created on the basis that times could change and the constitutionalism and the mandate could also change. The International Court of Justice has never changed. In this court, there is no chamber for appeal. There is no chamber for amicus curiae, for people to bring in their opinions in terms of individuals or organizations that are hurt in one way or the other, or good opinions that could shape the outcome of the findings or the cases filed there. This court, therefore, remains one of the most obnoxious, one of the most opaque institutions whose findings we don't know who decides and how the decisions are taken, how stakeholders are supposed to recourse to a remedy, where to get a remedy, we don't know. A court has no chambers, no lower chamber, no upper chamber for appeal. It has itself as a final court of jurisdiction around the world. Are the people of the world going to say, is Somalia and Kenya going into this court, seeing the obstacles that they will cause for the region? Those are the questions I ask. And I want my viewers and those listening to this tape to understand that Africa needs to solve the problem in an African way. There is no other way to solve the problem of Somalia and Kenya amicably than sitting on a table to have a discussion, find ways of resolving the conflict that has brought us to not talking terms. But Somalia seems to be pushed by external darker forces to go and dismember the unity that we have in the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. ICJ as a court is an institution that is very opaque, very dark in its sense of darkness, that you don't know how decisions are made. There is no counter checks and balances in the decision making. I therefore urge Somalia and Kenya not to attend this court. I urge Somalia and Kenya to avoid this court for the sake of peace in the Indian Ocean. I also have called upon the countries that are supporting Somalia to take this case, to withdraw their support for the sake of security, because we have only one common enemy. The enemy are the terrorists killing the innocent Somalis who need our help to be liberated from these fighters who have come and gathered in the great once country, or the Pearl, one of the African, Pan-African countries in Africa. Thank you very much, viewers. That is my message to the world. Let's spread it. The International Court of Justice is opaque. It doesn't have appeal chamber. It doesn't have preparation chamber. It doesn't have any. Once the decision is made, the decision is final. Do we need that? Do we call that democratic? I leave it to you. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for that thought out there. So I believe Africans are watching, and we'll see how that happens, and how the Kenya and Somalia, the row, we'll see how at the end of the day it has to be resolved. And I think the relationship between Somalia and Kenya, it's very, very important, and Somalia needs Kenya and Kenya needs Somalia. And so we cannot live in alienation. We need each other. So if they can find a way of resolving this matter amicably, that will be the best thing for this region. So we just leave it at that. And right now, do we take a very short break, or do I just go right into the African? Okay, so we take a very short break, and then don't go too far. I'll be coming back with the latest from Zimbabwe, Mauritius, Cameroon, Nigeria, and other African countries, and we'll be looking at what has been making headlines across Africa. Please don't go too far. Good morning, Africa. We'll be right back.
Viewers, those listening to this tape or this video, I want to bring to your attention that the politics of proxy wars in Africa is becoming real, and it has become a reality. I want to bring to this the attention of the African states that time and time again we have fallen victims of proxy wars. We fight wars that are not ours. We fall in conflicts that are not supposed to be, don't help Africa, and they don't help our countries at all. The proxy war that is in East and Central and the Horn of Africa has been ignited, supported, equipped by France. It has been very real that the French government, quietly through its company called Total Oil, has been searching for resources around the triangle of East and Central Africa and the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. The LAPSET was one of them, which could have been a landmark project for the people of France. They withdrew from it. The Tanga to Mwanza, they made it, they withdrew from it. The search for oil and resources through Total Oil has brought us the dangers of a proxy war in the region. It is therefore very prudent for people of the region to understand the dynamics that we are going through. For example, in Rwanda and the Burundi conflict, there is a proxy war. We are fighting a proxy country. It has brought us to a war between the two countries, between Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi. There is a proxy war in Congo who is sponsoring a resurgence of rebels that are fighting President Tshisekedi because he was not supported by countries that we know very well. This type of strategy has happened in North Africa, where Libya has been reduced to rebels, where each faction, even the government supported by United Nations, is being bombarded by a rebel called Khalifa Haftar, who is funded by countries that we know. The question of Somalia and the Kenyan maritime presents a challenge, a test case for Africa and East Africa to stand firm and denounce the actions of countries that bring proxy wars and proxy politics in our region. It is therefore my humble submission that for this conflict, for this to end, we must do enough publicity advocacy around the area to tell and explain to the international community why this problem is going to create an imbalance in the peace in the region, and the regional peace will be affected. It is therefore my humble submission that as a Ugandan whose troops, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers of other many millions Ugandans who are in Somalia, condemn any action by the Somali government to try to resolve issues that should have been resolved amicably as Africans within the African confines. I submit, therefore, that some of us will go a mile further to do now, from now onwards, to expose, to show the challenges of these countries that make us fight a proxy war in Africa. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Welcome back. This is Good Morning Africa, and we're just at the last tail end of the show. We've been looking at, the row between Kenya and Somalia and the Somali-Kenyan maritime crisis. Will it be solved by the ICJ? And we've seen a lot of you have been writing to us. And I see your comment here, Ibrahim. You're asking, if you believe that the ICJ will not resolve this case, why Kenya, they accepted? Why did Kenya accept to go to the court? Because I think Somalia accused Kenya in the court. So Kenya being, ratified, being part of the United Nations and the ICJ. So Kenya had to respond. But Kenya's position has been from the start to resolve the matter, to have an outside of court settlement, which Somalia has insisted it is not interested in. And so that is there. And that is so far how that matter is. So let's just go straight to what other news is making headlines across Africa, and we start with Cameroon. And in a rare address to the nation, Cameroon's President Paul Biya has announced plans for major talks to end the conflict in the English-speaking regions of the country, where Ambazonia fighters are demanding independence. The two Anglophone regions argue they have been marginalized for decades by the central government and the French-speaking majority. Mr. Biya outlined measures to quell the crisis, which began 3 years ago when lawyers and teachers in the northwest and the southwest regions went to strike over attempts to impose French in schools and courts. We go to Mauritius, where Pope Francis has said that the UK should comply with the United Nations resolution demanding that it return control of the Chagos Islands of Mauritius. The former UK colony says it was forced to give up the Indian Ocean archipelago, now a British overseas territory, in 1965 in exchange for its independence. The UK has previously said it will hand the islands back to Mauritius when they are no longer required for the defense purposes. Between 1967 and 1973, the United Kingdom evicted the island's entire population to make way for a joint military base with the United States, which is still in place on Diego Garcia, one of the Chagos Islands. And we go to Zimbabwe, where the body of Zimbabwe's former president Robert Mugabe has left Singapore, where he died last week, for burial in his home country. Earlier, a police motorcade had escorted a hearse and other vehicles to the airport from the funeral parlor where his body had been held after his death last week. Mr. Mugabe, who was 95, had been receiving a hospital treatment in the city-state. Hundreds of people are expected to gather at the airport in the capital, Harare, on today afternoon for the arrival of the plane carrying his body. His remains will lie in state for 2 days to allow the public to pay their respects. And we go to Libya, where Rwanda has agreed to take in hundreds of African migrants who are currently being held in Libyan detention centers. A joint agreement between the government, the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHRC, and the African Union was announced on Tuesday. An initial group of 500 people will be evacuated by aeroplane to Rwanda in the coming weeks, a statement has said. The group, which includes the children and vulnerable young people, is mainly made up of refugees from the Horn of Africa. And we go to Liberia, where a group of Liberian traditional chiefs and elders has called on President George Weah to set up a war and economic crimes court to tackle growing impunity in the country. The chiefs, in a joint statement, expressed concerns over the handling of public funds since Mr. Weah assumed the presidency last year. This includes $104 million in newly printed local banknotes and $25 million withdrawn from the National Reserve for infusion into the economy. The government has yet to account for this money. And in Kenya and British lawyers have submitted a complaint to the United Nations Human Rights Council on behalf of the Kenyans who were forced from their land during the British colonial era, where they said they suffered horrific human rights abuses when British settlers took over their land in what is now Kericho County in the fertile Rift Valley. The land was later leased to multinationals, including tea companies. The lawyers hope hundreds of elderly people and their relatives can get justice and compensation from the British government. In 2013, thousands of elderly Kenyans won a case close to $20 million after going to court over the same matter. And in Nigeria, Human Rights Watch has accused the Nigerian military of detaining more than 3,500 children over the last 7 years. The children, almost half of them girls and some as young as 7 years, are accused of having links to the Islamic Boko Haram militant group, the rights group says in its report. Many of them say they were arrested after fleeing Boko Haram attacks on their villages in the northeastern of the country. They are detained without charge for months or years and crammed into military barracks and unable to contact the outside world. Former detainees from Jiwa military barracks in the northern eastern city of Maiduguri told Human Rights Watch they experience hunger and torture. And we move to Mozambique, where Mozambican President Philip Nyusi on Tuesday commented on xenophobic incidences in neighboring South Africa, issuing a stern condemnation of the act. The privately owned STV Nauticas reported the president as saying over 500 Mozambicans lost their homes due to the violence. He also said the government had activated processes to repatriate affected nationals, and Mozambique becomes the second African nation to do so. That is after Nigeria. We go to Ethiopia, where the identification of human remains from the crash of Ethiopian airline flight 302 is complete, the head of Ethiopia's police said late on Monday, 6 months after the plane nosedived into farmland outside the capital, Addis Ababa. The investigation was very challenging, said Endesho Taseo, that is the Commissioner General of the Ethiopian Federal Police, in a statement during the live broadcast in the state television. The Boeing 737 MAX slammed into the ground with such force that only fragments of those who died could be recovered. And we go to Uganda, where the Ugandan government has endorsed the establishment of the Uganda National Kiswahili Council, whose main objective is to guide the introduction of Kiswahili as the second national official language in the country. Addressing journalists about the cabinet decision at State House Entebbe on Monday, Mr. Ofono Opondo, the executive director of Uganda Media Center, said that the establishment of the council is provided for in the constitution and is mandated to ensure that Kiswahili is rooted as the second national language of Uganda. And we end with South Africa, where South Africa state broadcaster SABC has suspended 3 employees, claiming that last week's transmission of the wrong clip of President Cyril Ramaphosa's speech to the nation was sabotage. It showed Mr. Ramaphosa fluffing his prepared speech and asking to repeat it. His address focused on xenophobia attacks in the country and the murder of a young woman, which had sparked protests in the country. The clip that was broadcast was shared on social media and widely mocked, with some criticizing President Cyril Ramaphosa. So that is the latest. I don't know what is happening across where you are, but you could share with me, and we can talk about what is happening. Of course, let me just go through it very, very quickly because we don't have much time, perhaps only 10 minutes left. So, of course, President Paul Biya yesterday, and he made an announcement, a press conference, and the world was waiting to hear what Cameroon's President Paul Biya was going to say, especially in regards to the crisis in the Anglophone region of Cameroon. Remember, Ambazonians, as they would prefer to be called in the English-speaking part of the Cameroon, have been wanting, to have their own country, and the crisis for a very long period of time now. And the crisis escalated in 2016 when the government government, the larger government of Mr. Paul Biya, and the French part wanted to forcefully have French as the language of choice to be taught in schools, to be used teaching in schools here in the Anglophone region. Remember, they don't speak any French. And also all the court proceedings across Cameroon, including the Anglophone regions, also to be conducted using English. And so the teachers in the Anglophone region are actually the ones who started they went on strike and they were protesting this move because they're saying you cannot force us to teach in a language that we don't even understand, we don't even speak, to the children who don't even understand and don't even speak this language. So there has been calls for tolerance in fact in regards to accepting French and English and accepting Cameroon as a bilingual country and as a means of communication, that English and French could be accepted and integrated in both societies. But the government of Paul Biya has not been very keen on this, and so Anglophones they started the crisis that started over 2 years ago, and so he has been sending his officials from his government to the English-speaking part of the Cameroon and trying to, tell them, surrender your arms, because the Ambazonians went, the Anglophone-speaking Cameroonians, they went and they were also armed because the military from the Paul Biya government was coming and attacking the Anglophone region, especially after the protests broke in 2016. And so it has been a war that has led to a huge humanitarian crisis and is one of the worst wars in the world that is considered to have been neglected and has not received the attention that it deserved from across the world. And so President Paul Biya yesterday came out and he said to have announced plans for major talks to end the conflict in the English-speaking regions of the country where Ambazonian fighters are demanding for independence. But also now he's coming out to demand to talk. But remember, about over 2 weeks ago, there was the Ambazonian leaders or the Anglophone leaders who have been agitating for the separation and, for their rights to be recognized in Cameroon were actually slapped with a lifetime sentence, and they're now serving lifetime sentence in courts, in jails there in Yaoundé. And so you wonder now that Paul Biya wants to talk, who does he want to talk to? Because the people he's supposed to be talking to, they're in jail for life. And of course, there has been a process for appeal, but that is yet to be seen how much progress it has made. So now Paul Biya comes out in an announcement and says, okay, now I think I want to talk to the Anglophone. But you want to talk to the Anglophone, and the representatives are in jail somewhere in Yaoundé. So I don't even understand the hypocrisy of that sentence. And also, it was expected that perhaps he will maybe pardon some of the leaders or all the leaders for the sake of peace. And if at all he really means, his words when he says he wants to reach out and talk to the Anglophone, I think the Anglophones would expect for him, President Paul Biya, to pardon or to remove the life sentence or to remove their leaders from jail. And now that will show some goodwill on his part as the president of Cameroon, and that perhaps will form the basis of a free talk and that might resolve these problems that has been plaguing the Anglophone region since over a period of time. But of course, the tensions escalated in 2016. So nothing much that he said. Remember, the two Anglophone regions argue they have been marginalized for decades by the central government and the French-speaking majority. And Mr. Biya outlined measures to quell the crisis, which began, of course, 3 years ago. But he cannot. I think this cannot happen until the leaders of the Anglophone region, out of a goodwill from President Paul Biya, if he really means business and he wants to find a solution to this, he should start by releasing the leaders, who are agitating for the people, for the rights of the Anglophone, who now he says he wants to talk to. He has to release the leaders, at least for now, I think. So we're just waiting to see how the rest of the Anglophone people will be reacting to this information and this press conference by President of Cameroon, Mr. Paul Biya, that he made yesterday. And of course, the body of Zimbabwean former President Robert Mugabe left Singapore. That was late evening in Singapore. That is early morning here, where he died last week, and he's expected to arrive in Harare in the afternoon. I think we are in the afternoon, just a few minutes to 1 p.m. I do not know that the body has arrived yet in Harare. Perhaps it's almost there, or perhaps it's there. I don't know. You can tell me. But the body is expected to arrive in Harare this afternoon. Remember, Mugabe died last week. It's not clear from out of what, but we are assuming out of old age. He has been very sickly, and after the ousting of having been removed through the bloodless military coup that happened in 2017, it is believed that he's not been having the best of health since then, and he's been very, very affected, and he has died a very bitter man. He felt that the people that he served and he went to jail for, and have really they did not keep their promise to him. I don't know which was that, but they're also saying he felt very, very betrayed. That is according to some information coming from the family source there, the family spokesperson, Mr. Leo Mugabe. And so his body is expected to arrive in the capital this afternoon, and of course his remains will lie in state for 2 days to allow the public to pay their last respect. But meetings between government and his family so far has failed to resolve the outstanding question of where he will be buried. Now, he has been accorded hero status for liberating Zimbabwe from colonialism, and a grave at the National Shrine has been reserved for him. As I said yesterday, his first wife, Sally, was buried at the Heroes' Acre, and there is a plot there that even Mugabe knew that is where he'll be buried, next to his first wife, who was a Ghanaian. But his family members reportedly said his dying wishes was to be buried in his rural home, and did not want those who ousted him from power in November 2017 to be present to preside over his funeral. So clearly, Mugabe died a very, very bitter man there. So let's just see. And like I said, I don't know if the body has arrived yet in Harare, or it's almost there, because I've been here for the last 2 hours. So I really don't know if there has been any other developments about that, but his body is expected from Singapore to Harare there this afternoon, so that his last burial rites can start. And of course, it will lay in public for 2 days, so that Zimbabweans who loved him and others who cherished him can go there and pay their last respect. And all right, we were talking about the Mediterranean and the crisis in Mediterranean after Libya, the falling of former Libya stronghold Muammar Gaddafi, and it has been a crisis and a crisis over crisis over there in Libya, and we've seen a lot of deaths of other Africans and nationalities who are trying to use that, because it has become a very porous place, and to use that to access Europe, and it also become a market where Arabs are literally selling other black Africans there. So it's bad things are happening there in Libya. And so there has been some refugees who are being held in detention centers there in Libya, and the United Nations Refugee Agency and also the AU are negotiating and trying to find which country can they take these refugees. And Rwanda agreed to take at least 500 refugees, and the initial group of 500 people will be evacuated by airplane to Rwanda in the coming weeks. A statement has said that group, which includes children, vulnerable young people, is mainly made up of refugees from the Horn of Africa. So you see, this is what wars and makes this as a result of wars, because the citizens of these countries from the Horn of Africa are fleeing to look for greener pastures. They're fleeing because their lives are in danger. They're fleeing because they don't feel like the government is actually has their interest at heart. So it's different reasons, but especially when the citizens feel we are not safe being at home, so we'd rather go and risk dying at the Mediterranean. This is something that should call all Africans to stop and really start, especially the African leadership, and really start looking at things perhaps a bit different. Why is it that Africans are dying in their numbers in the Mediterranean? And the people you see coming out and making statements are the European Union, the Red Cross, is the United Nations, but I've not heard AU raise concerns about our Africans are dying in the Mediterranean, and what can we do differently to make sure that our young people don't have to leave this continent if they really don't have to. I've not heard any head of state coming out and expressing regret that some Africans died in the Mediterranean. So it's very interesting, but also very sad at the same time. So I think that my time is about done. So I think we've talked so much, and so hopefully you can meet here tomorrow for another edition of Good Morning Africa. But for now, on behalf of Dr. Matsanga, who left us a few moments ago, and my name is Miriam Ogutu, and thank you so much for joining us today. Ibrahim, Oji, the rest of you there who have been engaging with us. Ahmed Ali, you're saying you love your country and you love Amaji as your president. That is very good. And the rest of you, thank you so much. So join us here tomorrow for another edition of Good Morning Africa, 11 a.m. East African time. This has been Good Morning Africa, courtesy of Punchline Africa Television, where we are all matters Africa, and everything that happens in Africa is our business. And I think that it is our time to drive and to make and to share to the world our own narrative in our own way. Thank you so much. Let's meet here tomorrow.